a brave gnome with the keenest eye, a loyal shrub with the sharpest wit, and a merry tune carried on the wind. Milo and Gooseberry blazed the trails again. Milo Pierce, accompanied by his trusty awakened shrub companion, Gooseberry, the clever and daring trailblazer who leads the way for discovery and adventure in the uncharted wilderness. Return with us now to those thrilling journeys of yore. Milo and Gooseberry ride the trails once more.
The Wildlands sprawled wide under a pale blue sky, its rolling grasslands broken by occasional clusters of rugged boulders and scattered groves of hardy trees. The air was crisp and dry, carrying with it the faint scent of wild sage. Milo Pierce adjusted the brim of his hat as he surveyed the horizon, his sharp eyes scanning the open expanse for any sign of movement. No forests, no familiar trails, Milo murmured, crouching to examine a patch of disturbed earth. This land is something else entirely. Gooseberry, standing just behind him, tilted his leafy head, his wooden limbs swaying slightly in the breeze. No trees to guide us, no canopy for cover. This place demands caution, Milo. It may seem empty, but it's far from unguarded. Milo smirked, brushing a lock of wind-blown hair from his face. You're starting to sound like me, Gooseberry. A proper scout, through and through. The gnome's hand hovered over a faint set of prints in the dirt, large, deliberate, and heavy. The impression of claws was faint but undeniable. He traced the edges with his gloved fingers, his brow furrowing. Something big passed through here. Not in a hurry, either. This wasn't a beast running wild. It was stalking. Gooseberry rustled uneasily, his branches trembling in the light wind. Or being stalked. Before Milo could respond, a low, resonant voice called out from the rise of a nearby hill. And you'd be correct on both counts. Milo and Gooseberry turned sharply, weapons half drawn, before relaxing at the sight of a familiar figure descending toward them. A centaur, broad-chested and towering, emerged from the tall grass. His coat gleamed like polished mahogany, though it was marred by streaks of sweat and dirt. His human torso bore battered armor, and across his back hung a longbow of masterful craftsmanship. He carried a spear in one hand, its shaft worn but sturdy. "Buckeye Thorne," Milo exclaimed, his face lighting up with recognition. "Of all the places to run into you." Buckeye allowed a faint smile to cross his stern face, though the weight in his gaze spoke of deeper concerns. "Trailblazing, as always, Milo. But this time, I'm afraid your trail has led to greater danger than most would dare follow." Milo's sharp eyes caught the way Buckeye's hand brushed his side, where the faint glimmer of dried blood seeped through his armor. "You're hurt," Milo said, stepping closer. Buckeye waved him off with a weary hand, though the slight tremor in his movements betrayed the truth. "Just a scrape. I've had worse." Gooseberry creaked forward, his leafy limbs extending slightly as if inspecting the centaur. "Such a wound is no small matter, especially in this terrain. Tell us what happened." Buckeye sighed, lowering himself onto his haunches. The weariness in his movements spoke volumes. "A Rakshasa," he said at last, his voice heavy with both anger and exhaustion. "A fiend from the nine hells. His name is Volver Ashalot, and his cunning is matched only by his cruelty." Milo's expression hardened, his cheerful demeanor giving way to seriousness. "A Rakshasa? Out here? What's he after?" Buckeye tightened his grip on his spear. "I captured him weeks ago, bound him in dimensional shackles so he couldn't plane shift back to his infernal realm. I was taking him to White Plume to hand him over to the Guild of Heroes. But he escaped me." "Escaped?" Gooseberry's voice was calm, though tension radiated from his frame. "Even with the shackles?" Buckeye's jaw clenched. "He's a master of lies and patience. He waited until my guard was down, then struck with an infernal dagger. The wound isn't fatal, but it's cursed. It slows me down, weakens me." Milo frowned, his mind already racing through possibilities. "And now he's out here, planning his next move." Buckeye nodded. "He can't plane shift with the shackles still on, but that won't stop him. He'll be hunting for a way to remove them, and when he does, he'll vanish back to the nine hells, or worse, stay here and wreak havoc." Milo stood, brushing dust from his gloves. His small frame bristled with determination. "Well, you've got help now. Gooseberry and I are with you." The awakened shrub nodded solemnly. "The forest may be far behind us, but our duty remains the same. This land must be protected." Buckeye's weariness gave way to a faint spark of hope. I won't say no to your help, but understand this. Ocelot is no ordinary foe. He'll stop at nothing to win, and he has the patience to wait for his moment. Milo's grin returned, sharp and fearless. Good. We like a challenge. Lead the way, Buckeye. Let's go catch us a Rakshasa. As the trio set off, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grasslands. The trail was faint, the horizon uncertain, but Milo, Gooseberry, and Buckeye moved forward with purpose. Somewhere in the vast expanse, Ocelot was scheming, and they would need every ounce of their cunning and courage to stop him. The Wildlands stretched ahead, bathed in the amber glow of the setting sun. Milo Pierce led the way, his boots crunching softly against the dry ground as he followed the faint trail of disturbed grass and claw marks. Behind him, Buckeye Thorne's hoofsteps were steady but heavy, his wounds from the cursed dagger taking their toll. Gooseberry moved silently at Milo's side, his branches swaying faintly in the breeze. He's leading us somewhere, Milo muttered, crouching to examine another patch of dirt where the tracks twisted unnaturally. These aren't the movements of someone running aimlessly. He's got a plan. Ocelot always has a plan, Buckeye growled, gripping his spear tightly. He's trying to stay one step ahead of us, but we're closing in. Gooseberry tilted his leafy head, his voice calm but wary. The closer we get, the more dangerous he becomes. The dimensional shackles might restrict his escape, but they don't diminish his cunning or his magic. The trio pressed on, cresting a low ridge that overlooked a jagged outcropping of boulders. The rocks loomed like a fortress, their crevices deep and dark. Milo stopped short, narrowing his sharp eyes. There, he whispered, pointing to a shadow that moved unnaturally among the rocks. Buckeye hefted his spear, his voice low. He knows we're here. Stay sharp. They moved down the ridge, each step slow and deliberate. Milo's hand hovered near his short sword, while Gooseberry's branches quivered with latent energy, ready to summon his magic. The stillness of the Wildlands was oppressive, as though even the wind held its breath. As they neared the rocks, a deep, silken voice broke the silence. So persistent, Mr. Thorne. I must admit, I underestimated your resolve. Milo's grip tightened on his weapon as Ocelot's form emerged from the shadows. The Rakshasa was tall and regal, his black fur gleaming like polished obsidian in the fading light. His golden eyes burned with a predator's intelligence, and the faint glow of the dimensional shackles on his wrists seemed to mock his restrained power. And you've brought companions, Ocelot said smoothly, his gaze sweeping over Milo and Gooseberry, a shrub and a rodent. How charming. Save the flattery, Buckeye snapped, stepping forward with his spear raised. You're coming back to White Plume, one way or another. Ocelot chuckled, the sound low and resonant. And here I thought you were a hunter. You should know better than to corner prey that still has its claws. With a flick of his wrist, Ocelot sent a wave of dark energy surging toward them. Milo dove to the side, rolling into a crouch as the blast struck the ground where he had stood moments before, scattering dirt and debris. Gooseberry raised his branches, summoning a barrier of vines that absorbed the remnants of the attack. Buckeye charged forward, his spear gleaming as he aimed for Ocelot's heart. The Rakshasa twisted away with feline grace, his movements unnaturally fluid. Impressive, Ocelot purred, slashing at Buckeye with his claws. The Centaur blocked with his shield but staggered under the force. Milo knocked an arrow and fired, the shaft streaking toward Ocelot. The Rakshasa sidestepped, the arrow barely grazing his velvet robes. He turned to Milo, his grin sharp. Ah, the little gnome has teeth. But let's see if you have the bite to match. Ocelot lashed out with another wave of magic, forcing Milo to retreat. Gooseberry countered with a blast of wind, but Ocelot shrugged off the spell. His laughter echoed across the rocks. You're an impressive shrub, I'll give you that. But your amateur magic has no effect on the uncanny Ocelot. With a sudden burst of speed, Ocelot retreated deeper into the rocky outcropping. Milo cursed under his breath. He's trying to lead us off course. Stay on him, Buckeye shouted, limping after the retreating figure. We can't let him escape. The trio scrambled through the rocks, but as they emerged on the other side of the outcropping, Ocelot was gone. Milo scanned the ground, but he could find no trace of their foe. Gooseberry's branches rustled as he surveyed the terrain. He's not running aimlessly. He's leading us away from his true goal. Buckeye's expression darkened. The shaman. Milo turned sharply. The tiefling shaman we heard about on the trail? The one who can remove curses? Buckeye nodded grimly. If he can convince her to remove the dimensional shackles, We'll lose him for good. We need to move. By the time Ocelot reached the shaman's dwelling, a modest stone hut nestled in a grove of twisted trees, the first stars had begun to pierce the darkening sky. The Rakshas's golden eyes gleamed as he approached, his movements deliberate and calculated. The tiefling shaman emerged from her hut, her robes adorned with arcane symbols and talismans of protection. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the imposing figure before her. "You're not welcome here, fiend," she said coldly, her staff gripped tightly. Ocelot inclined his head, his voice soft and persuasive. "Please, shaman, hear me out. I am not the monster you think I am. I have been unjustly imprisoned by cruel hunters who seek to destroy me." The shaman's gaze flicked to the glowing shackles on his wrists, her brow furrowing. "Those are dimensional shackles. They're not placed lightly. They are tools of oppression," Ocelot countered, his voice smooth as silk. "I was bound by those who fear my power, who would rather see me enslaved than free. But you," he stepped closer, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "You understand magic. You understand justice." The shaman hesitated, her grip on her staff loosening slightly. "And what would you have me do?" "Remove them," Ocelot said simply. "Free me from this unjust burden, and I will reward you beyond your wildest dreams. Gold, power, knowledge. It is all yours, if you only cast the spell." The shaman's expression wavered, torn between caution and temptation. "And what of the hunters chasing you? Will they bring their wrath upon me if I help you?" "I will ensure you are protected," Ocelot purred, his voice laced with a powerful enchantment. "No harm will come to you. You have my word." The shaman's wisdom failed her, and she lost her resolve, falling for the Rakshas's charm. Her lips moved as she whispered an incantation under her breath. The magic of Ocelot's suggestion tugged at her mind, luring her into helping an enemy. "Very well then, be free of your chains." A shimmering wave of energy surrounded the dimensional shackles. With a faint clang, the enchanted manacles fell to the ground, their glow fading. Ocelot straightened, flexing his clawed fingers as a triumphant grin spread across his face. "You have my gratitude, shaman," he said, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "And now, I must take my leave." Before the shaman could respond, the Rakshasa vanished into a swirl of shadows, leaving her alone as regret washed over her. The dimensional shackles lay discarded on the ground when Milo, Gooseberry, and Buckeye Thorne entered the grove. The Centaur Buckeye stood over them and planted his spear firmly in the dirt, his jaw clenched with frustration. His flared nostrils and tense posture made it clear he was holding back an outburst. The tiefling shaman stood a few paces away, her staff trembling in her hands. Her crimson skin seemed pale under the moonlight, and her golden eyes darted nervously between Buckeye and Milo. "I didn't know," she stammered. "I thought he tricked me. Please, I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" Buckeye's voice was low and sharp, like the edge of a blade. He turned toward her, his eyes blazing. "You freed a Rakshasa. Do you have any idea what you've done?" The shaman flinched, lowering her staff. "He used magic on me. Enchantment spells. He clouded my mind." Buckeye's hoof stamped the ground with a dull thud. "Magic or no magic, you still cast the spell. Do you know how many lives he'll destroy now that he's free? How far his chaos will spread?" "Buckeye," Milo said gently, stepping forward and placing a hand on the centaur's arm. "None of us are immune to such tricks. He fooled her, just like he's fooled so many before." Gooseberry's branches swayed as he approached, his tone calm but pointed. "If Ocelot could manipulate a seasoned hunter like you, Buckeye, what chance did she have? Blame the Rakshasa, not the victim." Buckeye let out a slow breath, his grip on his spear loosening slightly. His anger softened, though it didn't fade entirely. She should have been stronger. "Strength isn't about never falling for lies," Gooseberry said, his leaves rustling thoughtfully. "It's about what you do after you've fallen. That's the difference between a mistake and a failure." The shaman raised her head, her expression filled with remorse. "If there's any way I can make amends, tell me. I'll do whatever it takes to help you stop him." Milo's gaze softened, and he offered her a small smile. "Start by telling us your name." She blinked, surprised, then straightened slightly. "My name is Kaylee Thornbloom." Milo nodded, extending his hand. "I'm Milo Pierce, and this is my companion Gooseberry. The big guy here is Buckeye Thorne. We're all here for the same reason, to make sure Ocelot doesn't get away with whatever he's planning." Kaylee hesitated, then clasped his hand briefly. "Thank you. And I'm sorry." Buckeye grunted, but his expression softened slightly. Save your apologies. What's done is done. Just don't let it happen again. Kaylee nodded earnestly, then stepped closer to the Centaur. You're wound. It's cursed, isn't it? Let me help you. Before Buckeye could object, she raised her staff and whispered an incantation. A soft golden light enveloped the gash along his flank, and the tension in his muscles eased as the pain ebbed away. He flexed his injured leg experimentally, his brows lifting in mild surprise. That's better, he admitted reluctantly. You'll still need rest, Kaylee said. Stay here tonight. My grove is safe, and you'll leave stronger for it. The group settled in the grove, the gentle hum of Kaylee's protective wards surrounding them. Buckeye stretched out on the soft moss, his spear resting within arm's reach. Gooseberry rooted himself near a bubbling stream, his leaves shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Milo sat cross-legged by the fire Kaylee had conjured, sharpening his short sword as the night deepened. As Kaylee approached with a tray of herbal tea, Milo looked up and smiled. You've got a good place here, he said. Quiet, peaceful. I can see why Ocelot wanted to twist it to his advantage. Kaylee sighed, sitting beside him. I'll never forgive myself for helping him. No matter how much he manipulated me, I still made the choice. Then learn from it, Milo said simply. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small wooden flute. Raising it to his lips, he played a few light, lilting notes that carried through the grove like a breeze. This is a tune we use in Pygmy Village. Travelers whistle it to let others know they're friends. I'll teach it to you. That way, anyone from my village will know you can be trusted. Kaylee's lips curved into a faint smile. Thank you, Milo. Just keep it in tune, Milo said with a wink, and try not to give it to anyone sketchy. The next morning, the trio prepared to leave. Buckeye adjusted the straps of his gear, his movements more fluid after Kaylee's healing. Gooseberry stretched his branches, his wooden frame creaking faintly in the crisp morning air. Milo lingered by the grove's edge, turning to Kaylee one last time. You'll be all right? Kaylee nodded, standing tall. I will. And if you ever need help again, you know where to find me. Buckeye, already a few paces ahead, glanced over his shoulder. We've lost valuable time. White Plume needs to know what happened here. We're coming with you, Milo said, shouldering his pack. The Wildlands are big, and Ocelot isn't done with us yet. Gooseberry rustled his approval. Besides, someone needs to keep you grounded, Buckeye. You've got all the passion of a raging fire, and none of the patience to keep it under control. Buckeye snorted but didn't argue, a faint grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. The three adventurers pressed onward, their resolve firm. The Rakshasa had escaped, but the hunt was far from over. Together, they would ensure that Ocelot's schemes would meet their end, and perhaps, along the way, they would discover new strength in each other.
And so, Milo Pierce and his loyal shrub companion Gooseberry ride off once more, blazing trails and forging friendships across the uncharted wilderness. Until next time, keep your wits sharp, your mind open, and your heart true, and you just might hear the Scout's tune carried on the wind.